I've come to my grandson's birthday party and I've met Nuffield Australian scholar Andrew Todd. Now, Andrew's come with James Peck. Some of you know James who watch these videos. So, Andrew, whereabouts are you farming in Australia?
I'm farming in Darren Andrew, which is in the central wheat belt.
Yeah.
It's about 200 kilometres northeast of Perth.
Because I've been out that way. I was talking a few minutes ago to Merredin and York, and you're sort of in between that area.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're a little bit lower rainfall than York and a little bit higher rainfall than Merredin, so we're somewhere in between.
And what about your rainfall? Because I know obviously that's one thing you guys suffer with badly.
It's dry land agriculture, so there's no irrigation, and in my part of the world we're an annual average of around 320 millimetres, but it's fairly variable to get that average.
Yeah.
So
that's about half what we're on here in Lincolnshire, I think, more or less half. So for that rainfall, what would be your expected, say, talking about wheat, which everybody knows, what's your expected wheat yield?
On an average rainfall year, or our 10-year average wheat yield at the moment is around about 2.5 tonne per hectare. So in your language, that's, say, roughly 1 tonne per acre.
Yeah.
So low yields relative to what you guys might be used to, but we would be more interested in water use efficiency, and we'd measure our performance more on that than the absolute yield.
And then, so direct drilling everything, you move as little soil as possible to preserve moisture?
Yeah, absolutely. Very sandy soils compared to what I've seen here, and very low fertility, low organic carbon, pretty basically as hostile as it might get on the planet for producing grain crops. So.
And for those yields, how many fungicides are you putting on and fertilizer are you putting on those crops?
Very little fungicide, because we don't tend to have a lot of moisture in the crop canopy at the back half of the season when the disease pressure is higher, but that's seasonal. So we will have higher rainfall years where we're 350, 400 millimetres plus. 400 millimetres would be probably the top end. Those will be the fungicide seasons where we might need one pass of a fungicide at flag leaf emergence. But say, for example, this year we're only at about 170 millimetres for the year on one farm and 150 on the other for the whole year. So there'll be no fungicide this year because we're probably looking at crops more like, I'm hoping we can achieve 1.5 to 1.8 tonnes per hectare on the wheat.
And are you using liquid fertiliser or solid?
We use a mix of both. So our phosphorus is MAP, which is banded below the seed, granular, and then at sowing time we're using UAN just for handling. It's much easier to handle. So that's banded as well, injected below the seed, but then most of our post-emergent applications are urea, and that's based on a price decision. So we're generally 18 to 20% dearer for UAN. So we'll pay that premium for the ease of handling at sowing time, but we won't post-emergent.
No.
Some people do, they'll mix it with herbicide and fungicide and apply it through the boom spray, but we don't do a lot of that, we're spreading urea.
And on your cropping, what are the different crops you've got?
So we're growing wheat predominantly, probably ordinarily around 60% of our program, but we also grow barley, quite a bit of canola, 25 to 30% of our program.
So for listeners, that's oilseed rape, similar.
Oilseed rape, no different.
Yeah.
Mainly genetically modified varieties, hybrids.
Is it?
Yeah, our personal crop, 100% GM hybrids. And we grow oats, but we're generally not cutting the oats for grain. We cut them for hay, which is a premium market into Korea and into Japan. So believe it or not, it's 3 8x4x4 bales packed into one, strapped with steel, put in 40-foot containers and sent to Korea and Japan for racehorses.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's a reasonably, if we get the yield, it's a lucrative crop, but it's also a high-cost operation. We're not doing that ourselves on farm. We're selling to people that are doing that, but that's what happens with it. And perhaps interestingly, for your viewers, Australia is a very big exporter of grain. Not many people live in Australia, but we do produce a lot of food. So in Western Australia, we're exporting around 90% of what we produce.
Crikey. And it's interesting, we're talking about exports then and trade deals. Our government were really, really hyping it up big style when the trade deal was done with you guys. What was the reaction on your side of the water?
Look, I wouldn't even know. It's probably not such a big deal. I think we feel like as farmers we don't have a lot of influence in what goes on in those sort of negotiations, so we just concentrate on what's happening on our side of the fence.
And is your government supportive of agriculture or not?
I've been asked that a lot recently, and I think the honest answer is that I could say that they are, they're certainly not unsupportive, but as most of your viewers are probably aware, we don't have any subsidies whatsoever. No. The only thing we might get that's close to that is a fuel rebate, but in reality that's a rebate of a charge that the government adds to the fuel price to cover for road repairs. And we're talking about equipment that isn't being used on the road. So is that a subsidy, or is it just a rebate of a charge that isn't applicable? So yeah, it's an interesting one, and the more I travel, the more my perspective changes about how they view it. But the other thing I've said to people is we're a very small percentage of the population, and so we don't represent very many votes. So there's not a lot of incentive if you're a politician to create policy that's favourable for ag, because it isn't going to win you many votes.
No, because over here, the government really here are doing everything to sort of make life difficult for farmers. You understand that?
And honestly, I feel like that's very much what I learnt in 5 years of travel last year through Chile, Argentina, Italy, Spain, and then the US. I felt like, and I travelled with some Europeans in my group, a woman from the Netherlands, a couple of Irish, an Englishman. I felt like the Europeans were very much at war with the government, and the government was regulating their producers out of production, which is possibly good for us, but I mean it's a really confronting position for a grower in this part of the world.
How would it go down in your country if your government was saying, right, we'll pay you to take land out of production and we'll import food from countries that produce food to lower standards?
Well, it wouldn't go down well. I think that our culture and our industry, we're extremely proud of the fact that we stand on our own 2 feet, and we're viable, profitable, innovative businesses without that government support and any level of government interference. It's one of the things that we value the most, is that if you're a farmer in Australia, if you own or lease land and you're a farmer, you can do as you please with that, and we're proud of making our own way unsupported, but also largely uninterrupted.
Yes. Yeah. And how many acres have you got, or hectares have you got?
So we have run 2 properties. The home farm, which is at Darren, where you referred to, we're farming 4,200 hectares there, which is all cropped. And then we've just bought a farm about 300 kilometres southeast of that, which is 2,250 hectares, and that's been a bit of a work in progress, because it was bought to be a passive investment where we share farmed or leased it, but we weren't able to do that. So unfortunately, we're trying to operate it ourselves, and with that sort of distance, it's been a bit of a challenge. So we managed to get 60% of that in crop this year, and mostly utilising contractors to do that. Another local grower who had excess capacity and was able to put the crop in, and largely we spread the fertilizer, he's doing the spraying, and harvest, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
We've mentioned a little bit about costs. Land prices, land rents, what are they like with you?
Land prices in Australia, I would say, and my experience in Western Australia have just gone through the roof in the last 3 to 5 years. In my part of the world, we would have been averaging around about 8% capital growth over the last, say, 30 to 50 years. In the last 3 years, we've seen land values right where I farm move from probably around $1,400 or $1,500 an acre to north of 3,000, 3,300, 3,400 Aussie dollars an acre. And that's why we've bought a farm 300 kilometres away, because we haven't actually shifted out of into a different rainfall zone. We've shifted a lot further from Perth, so it's less desirable for people to live there. But the rainfall's quite similar, and there we paid just under 700. So at the same time, where I live and farm and home farm at $3,000 plus and 2.5 tonne wheat country, we've been able to purchase land at 30% of that value 300 kilometres away with perhaps 2 tonne country.
Right, okay. And what about fuel prices? Where are they with you at the minute? And do you use red diesel? Do you have red diesel?
No,
it's all one fuel?
All one fuel. Yeah. The excise is what's available, or the rebate. So that's probably reasonably difficult to police.
Right.
If I could convert my ski boat to diesel, I'd probably do that. But no, fuel is a big input cost. It would be in our top 5 or 6 input costs. Fuel prices are. I wish I had a lot more storage, because 2 or 3 years ago we were paying less than $1 Aussie per litre for diesel, and right now it's around $1.60. And at the peak it was over $2, so it has an impact.
Exactly,
but fertilizer has been a much bigger impact.
And on looking at say input costs, Glyphosate, we use a lot of glyphosate over here. I do and things. Can you remember glyphosate costs with you where they are?
Yeah, so glyphosate, it's had like fertilizer, but fertilizer hasn't come back to the same extent. Glyphosate pushed up from around $4 a litre to something like 15. It depends what loading you're talking about. So let's say 450. 450 would be our benchmark. I think that would have been $4, moved to $9 to $12, and is now back at $4. And like you, we use a lot of it, like minimum till, direct drill. The only way we kill weeds is out of a drum. And we use many different formulations. So we'll use 450 through to 600.
600 you've got?
Yeah, Crucial, I think, is 600 is a new farm product, Australian brand. We would probably rarely have less than 1.5 litres of 450 in a mix.
Oh, right,
yeah. And our rates are increasing. We're learning that we really need to keep our rates up.
Have you got resistance?
Absolutely. I would suggest that Western Australia is probably the world capital of herbicide
resistance. Is it
resistance. Really? Yeah, and I think, it's kind of obvious because we're under very tight margins. We're dealing with large areas, and so we tend to use low water rates and probably not high enough herbicide rates historically, and we've broken a lot of chemistry. But we've learnt from that, and we've got a lot of innovations that have allowed us to continue to farm in the face of the loss of a number of products. We're starting to see a lot more glyphosate resistance. It's becoming much more widespread, and that's a massive threat to our industry.
Yeah, I can imagine. It would be here as well if we get it here. Do you grow cane sugar?
No.
You don't? No. Because that's one thing, obviously, with me, I grow sugar beet, as a lot of farmers do in this particular area. And I think the trade deal allowed cane sugar to be brought into this country. But the argument we have is that a lot of the products that we have for growing sugar beet, or the products that we're banned from using on sugar beet are allowed in Australian cane sugar and other countries' cane sugar.
And other commodities. I think that's going to be an ongoing debate or point of difference or issue in negotiations for a long time to come, because based on our environment, we need a lot of these things to remain productive and profitable. And I think I might have said to some others here today, and perhaps you weren't there, but a presenter from the UK gave a presentation in Perth a couple of years ago at one of the grains conferences that I was at, and he presented a list of 36 pesticides that had been or were going to be regulated out of use in the EU, and every farmer in that room, and they were mostly farmers, West Australian farmers, was very concerned about this, because in that list were many products that are absolutely critical to our productivity, and frankly, if we lost them, the consequences would be significant. The amount of grain coming out of Western Australia would be drastically reduced because it would affect our productivity severely. And I guess you kind of have to understand our environment for that to make sense.
I understand that.
It's probably so foreign to someone from Europe who hasn't seen that sort of environment that the best way to describe it is producing grain in the desert. It literally is sandy soils, very low organic carbon, and very low rainfall. Most people I've had on my farm from Europe would say, especially if they come in the summertime, would say, "You're joking, there's not a blade of green anywhere. You're kidding me, you couldn't produce anything."
I can understand that.
So it's just so foreign that I think the system, and I'm not preaching to the converted. I'm trying to convince people that the opposite. We actually need these things, and so long as we can meet maximum residue limits in grain,
that's the biggest thing.
Set by our markets, then where's the issue? That would be the Australian perspective.
Well, thanks very much, Andrew. Good to meet you, and we're going to be coming out to Australia in the next year or so, we'll come and catch up with you and have a look around.
I really look forward to giving you a ride on what you might call the combine, but we'd call the header.
You call the header, I know. And the thing that we call the header, you call the front.
It's very confusing.
It is, So great, thanks very much. Hope everybody enjoyed that, and thanks for watching. And thanks, Andrew. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.